After Rob Reiner's death, the family's grief evolved into something more complicated than the sadness shared at the funeral. It hardened into shock when the will was finally revealed and his children discovered that nearly the entire fortune, an estimated $200 million built across a lifetime of filmmaking, advocacy, and investment, had been directed toward charitable causes rather than to them. That decision transformed sorrow into anger and left his children, especially Jake and Roy, feeling as if they had been written out of their own family story, replaced by institutions and causes that suddenly seemed to matter more to their parents than their own blood. Legal action soon followed as they found themselves thrust unwillingly into the public eye, walking into a Beverly Hills law firm, while cameras speculated wildly about an inheritance battle before any formal announcement had even been made. Meanwhile, practical rituals of loss occurred quietly behind the scenes. The coroner completed examinations. Cremations were performed at Mount Sinai Mortuary according to Jewish custom, and the ashes were taken to Jake's home as the family struggled with private grief unseen by the headlines. Yet the calm did not last because the real shock was not logistical but philosophical. Rob had long believed that too much inherited wealth could smother ambition and independence, and for years he had stated that his children should build lives on their own terms without relying on safety nets. That belief, which had guided his public advocacy and private thinking alike, translated into leaving everything to foundations and programs focused on education, social justice, health, and child development, the very causes he and Michelle had spent decades nurturing. To friends, the decision reflected deeply held convictions rather than punishment, but for his children it still felt like erasure, an emotional injury layered on top of loss. They were not rejecting charity itself, but they struggled with the sense that they had been excluded from their parents' final expression of love. As legal discussions intensified, attorneys warned that challenging charitable foundations would be long, public, and painful, but grief often speaks louder than caution, and the siblings pressed on, driven not just by money, but by unresolved questions about meaning, recognition, and belonging. Their father's legacy complicated everything because his life had never been defined solely by wealth. It grew from a long career beginning in acting and flourishing behind the camera through classics like When Harry Met Sally, Stand By Me, Misery, A Few Good Men, and through founding Castle Rock Entertainment, earning royalties, investment income, and substantial real estate gain from properties in Brentwood and Malibu that multiplied in value over time. Alongside Hollywood success, Rob and Michelle built reputations as committed activists, devoting time, energy, and influence to early childhood development, equality, and public policy, from shaping Proposition 10 in First 5 California to supporting marriage equality and educational initiatives, often working quietly without seeking praise. Their giving was not symbolic. It was hands-on, rooted in meetings, campaigns, documentaries, fundraisers, and advisory roles, turning compassion into real-world programs that affected millions. From that perspective, the decision to direct nearly all assets to charity fit perfectly with the values they had lived by, yet those same values unintentionally created the source of the family's deepest pain. Principles that celebrated independence now left their children feeling abandoned at the very moment they needed reassurance. Jake's own history of emotional struggles and battles with addiction added another layer of vulnerability, intensifying a sense of being left to navigate life entirely alone just as his parents were gone. Inside law offices, the conversations were raw. Disbelief, tears, anger, and determination intertwined as the siblings examined trusts, timelines, and potential legal grounds, hoping not only to contest financial decisions, but to reclaim some connection to their parents' legacy. Outside, the world continued to honor Rob and Michelle as champions of justice and compassion, while inside the family home, grief and resentment collided over what generosity should look like, and whether love must always include material provision. Friends suggested that Rob believed his children were strong enough to stand on their own, trusted that they would one day understand why he made the choices he did, and viewed money as something meant to keep working for society rather than cushioning heirs. But that conviction left questions unanswered. Was this truly a lesson in independence, or did a deeper emotional distance influence the decision? Could philanthropy coexist with personal reassurance, or had the children been unintentionally pushed aside in pursuit of broader ideals? Those unresolved tensions turned the will into more than a legal document. It became a mirror reflecting the complicated intersections of love, legacy, and loss. Rob's fortune, built through decades of creative achievement, royalties, business vision, and careful investments, now stood at the center of a painful conflict where no outcome could erase the hurt or fully restore what had already been lost. The children's reaction was not simply greed. It was a cry of people grieving parents, while also grieving their place in the parents' final story. Ultimately, the saga underscores a universal truth that stretches beyond Hollywood. Generosity toward the world can sometimes leave those closest to us feeling unseen, and even the most principled decisions can carry emotional consequences. Rob and Michelle dedicated their lives to improving society and protecting future generations, and yet that same dedication left their own family wrestling with the meaning of love, independence, and remembrance. In the end, the question left hanging is not just who receives the money, but what legacy truly means, whether it is measured in charitable impact, in the strength of children who are asked to stand alone, or in a fragile human need to feel chosen, valued, and remembered by the people who raised us.